Today we're rounding out our coverage of the $2 trillion spending bill by talking about small businesses. Unlike other programs in this package, this one heard the starting gun, fell over in shock, and promptly dropped a number 2 in its sports shorts. Now before we get into that drama, what were the noble intentions of this program? The way it's supposed to work is that the government will essentially pay 8 weeks of an eligible employer's labor costs through a loan that will be entirely forgiven if that employer retains its workers for 8 weeks without slashing their pay. Great plan, and for once, not a hint of sarcasm. So the Treasury has the money, the businesses need the money. This shouldn't be too complicated. Supply and demand, they're both there. What happened? Well, there's a whole pipeline between the Treasury and the businesses that is currently clogged, and different plumbers are taking apart different pieces of that pipe without any coordination. The way the pipe was supposed to work was businesses approach banks looking for loan verification. The bank runs your details, sees you're legit, and then gives you the stamp of approval. Then you get a loan from the bank that is backed by the federal government. If you can't pay it back, well, Uncle Sam's got the bank covered. If you keep all your employees paid and staffed, well then Uncle Sam's got you covered. The problem is when you start scratching any deeper than that, things get mind-bendingly confusing very quickly. Who's in charge of implementing the program? Well, this is an expansion of the existing Small Business Administration loan program that's being overseen by the Treasury Department. So, the Treasury's in charge?
With the small business owners, a number of them saying that they were on that conference call and that there's a tremendous power struggle going on between the Treasury and SBA, and that it's over process and forms is what they tell me.
Can we keep this bureaucratic Game of Thrones jockeying out of our pandemic response, please? Furthermore, the administrator position at the Small Business Administration has been passed around like a reefer at a Willie Nelson concert. The current acting administrator assumed her position in mid-January. I mention this because, oh boy, did that person just jump right into the deep end. Welcome to your first day on the job. Here's your laptop. We'll be working from home now. See you 4th of July. Because of these issues, the initial messaging from the Treasury Department and the Small Business Administration was pretty confusing. Now first, both agencies released a buzzer-shot guidance to the banks just hours before the program went live. It was almost to the point where I expected Mnuchin to say at a press conference, "Well, if you look at the timestamp, you received our email at 11:58. So technically, we're not late. Start using this program immediately." Still, at the end of that policy writing binge, America had a tangible policy that, once read, could be used by banks to make risk-free loans to small businesses. The Treasury and the Small Business Administration on Thursday evening issued new guidance on the program, which is aimed at keeping Main Street businesses from restaurants to nail salons from laying off their employees amid wide-scale shutdowns. Alright, so we had guidance on how to proceed. Wow, short episode. Unfortunately, banks never jump in with both feet unless they found out a way to sell predatory loans to people who can't afford them. If you buzzer-shot huge policy guidances, you're gonna have to wait a bit for the program to be implemented. Several of the country's largest banks didn't immediately participate in the program, saying that they needed more time to understand how it would operate. So at this point, all the federal government really had to do was show that the Small Business Administration and the Treasury Department were united and consistent on the guidelines. And just wait for bankers' lawyers to travel through the same Google pathways I did in researching this episode. And the government messed it up. Apparently, during this period, Steve Mnuchin was reading through the guidelines and said, "Wait, we said what? Well, let me just contradict that really quickly." On Tuesday, the Treasury released a 2-page document that appeared to contradict several terms the banks thought they had agreed to, leaving lenders on the hook for verifying the loans. Now this right here, this just killed the program. because it again showed huge ambiguity over who was in charge. If a bank approved a loan where the company had lied, could the bank be held liable for fraud? How do you handle the paychecks of gig economy workers in a paycheck protection program? Is it okay if I go and cry in the bathroom for a minute? All these questions and more were being levied at the Small Business Administration in the Treasury Department, and a magic 8-ball might have actually been more helpful in answering them. Meanwhile, money was being handed out by the banks who were willing to roll the legal dice. You know, the exact people you want handing out risk-free government-backed loans. Now this is why the terms are so radically different depending on the lending institution you're approaching. Some banks are saying, sure, we'll participate in your program. Some banks are saying, alright, but we'll only hand out money to businesses we have previous loans from, so we know there won't be any new fraud going on. And some banks, seeing the constantly changing rules, are social distancing at a safe 6 feet away from this program. The banking industry has complained the program's rules were still evolving, making it difficult for them to begin lending. Some, including those at the Small Business Administration though, are complaining that this is banks just not willing to help Main Street. A deputy at the Small Business Administration said, "So what they're saying is, I don't give a hoot about small businesses. What I care about is whether or not I have enough paperwork. It's crazy." One thing sits a little weird about that dismissal to me though.
I can assure you at 5 points, I've told these bankers they should take all their traders and put them in the branches. So there'll never be another opportunity to earn 5 points on a 90-day fully government guaranteed loan.
He's right. You'd have to really drop the ball to make that offer unappealing. Furthermore, in a show of just how set in quicksand these guidelines are, the government recently increased their interest from that aforementioned 5 points, or 0.5%, to 1% interest. It's a good deal if you can get it signed before your internet browser refreshes and the terms have changed. The rules really are constantly changing on this program, and similarly, on Monday, the Treasury Department said that banks could skip the typical vetting process for new loans when taking applications from new customers. Hey, you won't be held accountable for business fraud anymore. But you can also make risk-free loans to people without full background checks. 2006 called and they want their regulations back. Now everything I've said so far might lead you to think that this policy is a colossal tire fire. But money is being spent. So much in fact that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is asking for a $250 refill on this program. Now I can't talk too much about that request because very little is known to the public right now. President Trump said that banks have processed $70 billion in taxpayer-backed loans for 250,000 small businesses since Friday. Woohoo! But he also did not say how many of those loans had been approved, or how many firms have received any of the money. Well, that makes that number a lot less helpful. I'm a genius because I applied to Harvard. Did you get in? That's a secret. I definitely applied though. Now it's like $50. I also swung by their gift shop and bought a sweatshirt, so I'm practically an alumni. Now to conclude this episode on an encouraging note, most of these problems I'm talking about right now are communication based. So if you just put these people in a room for half a day, most of these problems would be resolved. Supply and demand are both there. We can make this work. Thank you, and that's all I have to say about that. Hello YouTube. First, I'd like to thank my patrons for helping me put out my videos. If you want to support independent, nonpartisan news looking into the overlooked, join this growing list of exceptional individuals by clicking on that link in the description. Also remember to subscribe and ring that bell so that freedom will continue to ring. Give me a thumbs up if you like what you saw, and lastly, as always, thank you for watching.